Back Look Cinema, the podcast.
I'm a school teacher. I teach English composition in a little town called Adley, Pennsylvania. The last 11 years, I've been at Thomas Alva Edison High School. I was a coach of the baseball team in the springtime. Back home, I tell people what I do for a living. And they think, well, now that figures. But over here, it's a big mystery. So I guess I've changed some. Sometimes I wonder if I'll change so much my wife is even going to recognize me whenever I get back to her. And how I'll ever be able to tell her about days like today. Ryan. I don't know anything about Ryan. I don't care. The man means nothing to me. He's just a name. But if going to Ramel and finding him so he can go home, if it earns me the right to get back to my wife, then that's my mission. Hello, friends. My name is Zoe. It's spelled Z-O or Z to the O if you're outside of the U.S. Welcome back. This is the 171st episode of Backlook Cinema, the podcast, where we take a look back at the movies of yesteryear, especially the movies of the latter half of the last millennium. If you like what you're about to hear, then tell your family, tell your friends, and tell your favorite military veteran about Backlook Cinema. Thanks for coming back. Sorry, there was no episode last week. And if you were wondering if I was going to come back and do a recording, yes, I'm back. And I thank you for joining me. And I appreciate you listening. And I hope you have a wonderful time as we get to discuss one of the grandeur movies of the 1990s. Like at the later end of the 1990s, they had a lot of incredible movies. And I'm about to talk about one of the greatest movies of all time on this here show. And the movie that I want to talk about is called Saving Private Ryan. And I remember watching this movie in the movie theater, and I don't even really know what drew me to this movie, probably because I was relatively new in the Army at that time. And I had only been in the Army for a few years, and I was living in Hawaii. And I think it's because I'm a fan of Tom Hanks. I like Tom Hanks movies. At least I haven't seen every Tom Hanks movie, but I'm rarely disappointed. I'll say I'm rarely disappointed when I go and see one of his movies. So it's like, and plus it was Steven Spielberg, and especially during at this time, Steven Spielberg was on fire. So you had a movie that's directed by Steven Spielberg and it's starring Tom Hanks, and it's a war movie, which I don't think I've ever really seen a war movie like this before. I don't think I had a huge interest in historical war movies. And that was one of the things. It's like, I haven't seen a movie like this before, so let me give this a try. And let me tell you how I was absolutely blown away. Just everybody talks about like the first scene and that the first act, the first scene, and that really gets you. That has an incredible impact. And I remember when I watched it in the theater, they had such an incredible sound design. It's just like, it really sounds like it's a battle scene. You hear there are bullets flying, there are people getting hit, there are soldiers being shot, and the impact of the bullets hitting the men is like forever seared into my memory. It's like sounded just like you'd think that it would sound like a bullet hitting meat or flesh. It was just incredibly impactful. And that's one of the things I think about when I think back on this movie. It's like that first scene just come roaring forward in the memory when I think about Saving Private Ryan. And I haven't watched it a whole bunch of times since. It is a great movie, and I enjoy watching it. And I can't tell you why. It's almost like I rarely watch it. I think this is this is probably the third time I've watched it. But it never disappoints. It's not a movie that where you think it's going to age poorly. It's just too well done for that kind of commentary. So let's go to the opening credits and talk more about Saving Private Ryan. In the latter part of World War II, Captain Miller is tasked with carrying out a most unusual mission. The captain is charged with gathering a handful of some of his best men and take them on a dangerous trek through enemy territory to locate a singular soldier and find a way to extract that soldier from the war and send him home. They only have a hint of where this soldier might be, and they have no idea if he's alive or dead. During the mission, Captain Miller and his men contemplate the value of one man's life and how many would have to die to see that this singular soldier can be sent home. The mission seems nonsensical. It does not seem like a wise use of their skills, yet they are determined to carry out their orders to save Private James Francis Ryan of Patton, Iowa. Saving Private Ryan was released on July 24, 1998, produced by DreamWorks Pictures, Paramount Pictures, Amblin Entertainment, and it grossed over $217 million in the U.S. and Canada, and over $482 million worldwide on a reported budget of $70 million. This movie did extremely well. It's another blockbuster for Mr. Steven Spielberg. And if we shift it to today's dollars, like if we adjust it for inflation and talk about what it would look like if the movie were released today, then that would mean that it would have grossed over $417 million in the U.S. and Canada. And it would have grossed over $927 million worldwide. And the budget would have been $134 million. So it definitely would have made its money back, even if it was only released in the United States. But being that this was a worldwide release, it made almost $1 billion. It's an incredible achievement as far financially and cinema. Just as far as cinema goes, it's just a great film. Like even if it had not had that incredible box office, it still would be a most effective story. This movie stars Tom Hanks as Captain Miller. You may have seen him in Castaway, a movie. I recorded a Castaway episode and it came out wrong. He's also in Forrest Gump. I knew I watched Forrest Gump and I was going to record it for a show, but ended up not recording it. So these are two movies that I have to come back to. However, I hit the third time's a charm because I did record Philadelphia, and you can check that out in 156. And he's also in a movie called A Man Called Otto, which is a movie that I'm eager to see since people are saying that it's a good movie. Up next is Matt Damon. He plays the titular Private Ryan. And you may have seen him in Good Will Hunting, The Martian, The Departed, or The Talented Mr. Ripley. And he's also a fairly good screenwriter to boot. Tom Sizemore, or is it Tom Sizemore? Tom Sizemore. He plays Sergeant Horvath. And you may have seen him in Black Hawk Down, or Heat, or Strange Days. He's been in so many movies, and he just has this manner about him that that he's like it's like he deals in weightier matters when you see him on the screen. That's what it seems like. And then there's Edward Burns. He plays Private Reuben, and you may have seen him in She's the One, which he also wrote, or the brothers McMullen, which he also wrote, because like Matt Damon, he is a screenwriter. When you look at his IMDb credits, it's like he has written just as many movies as he has acted in. And he's also been in a movie called Life or Something Like It. Then there's Barry Pepper. He plays Private Jackson. And you may have seen him in True Grit from 2010, or The Green Mile, or The Lone Ranger from 2013. And this is one of those, I think I mentioned this before in another show where he was a star in, but there's a thing where people are trying to make Barry Pepper happen, and it just didn't happen quite like people have predicted that it would. Up next is Adam Goldberg. He plays Private Mellish, and you may have seen him in A Beautiful Mind, Deja Vu, or Dazed and Confused. And the once and future star Vin Diesel plays Caparzo. You can count this as a role he got before he was famous. And you may have seen him in any of the Fast and Furious movies, or you may have heard his voice in any of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. And there was another franchise that didn't quite take off as anyone had planned, and that was the movie that started the Pitch Black series, or the Riddick series. Up next is Giovanni Ribisi. He plays T4 Medic Wade, and you may have seen him in Boiler Room, Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow, or Avatar. Jeremy Davies. He plays Corporal Upham, and you may have seen him in Solaris, or Twister, or Secretary. And then there were also a few cameo appearances by very well-known, very established actors, including Ted Danson, Paul Giamatti, or Dennis Farina. This movie was directed by aforementioned Steven Spielberg, and you may have seen some of his other movies, like Schindler's List, or E.T. the Extraterrestrial, which I believe is the very first Steven Spielberg movie that I ever watched, or Raiders of the Lost Ark, or what is considered the very first blockbuster, or the very first modern blockbuster, Jaws. Or you may have seen one of the few people who saw West Side Story in theaters, which I hear is good, but I have not seen. This is the West Side Story adaptation from 2021. Or you may have seen Ready Player One, which not as good as I hoped it would be. But I enjoy seeing all of the properties, many of the properties that all the IP that were incorporated in the film, and some of the IP that he had something to do with, that he was involved in bringing to the screen. He also directed Lincoln, which another movie that I heard was good and hadn't watched yet. And I think this is another Tom Hanks movie, Bridge of Spies. This movie was written by Robert Rodat, and he's written such films as The Command, The Catcher Was a Spy, and I haven't heard of any of those movies, but I have heard of Thor: The Dark World, which most people regard as, well, actually now it's in competition. So a lot of people regard Thor: The Dark World as the worst Thor movie, and I still stand by that. But then some people are saying that Thor: Love and Thunder is worse, and I disagree. I actually rather enjoy Thor: Love and Thunder, and I guess I'll just have to be alone on that mountain. I liked the goats. The goats made the movie. And finally, among other films that Robert Rodat wrote, he wrote The Patriot. And the music is by John Williams. This is Steven Spielberg, once again going back to one of his favorite composers, one of my favorite composers, and the composer that gave us the music for the Star Wars series, the music for the Indiana Jones series. And he's also done The Adventures of Tintin, the live action, well, actually it's a computer animated movie that was, I guess, done in the last couple of years. He's also made the music for War Horse and Munich and JFK. And that's it for the opening credits. I don't really have any new announcements, just to invite you to come over to shop at backlinkcinema.com/shop and see if there are some items that you would like to partake in. And also, still working on the eBay shop, Bazaar de Alonso. I'm not going to stop talking about it. I'm not going to do it. This is my penance. All right. So on to the next section or chapter in this podcast. We're going to talk about our favorite parts. All right, so this is the favorite parts, a portion of the show where I like to talk about all of our favorite parts of the movie. It could be a scene, and it normally is a scene, or it could be an actor, it could be a line of dialogue. It are things. It's the things that we remember about the movie. It's like 20 years later, we're still thinking about that one particular aspect of the movie that we really enjoy. And I want to go over some of these things. And I'm not going to go over a whole bunch. I think I picked out 5 of some of our favorite parts, some of my favorite parts in particular. And I know that a lot of these parts are shared by a lot of people. Because if you try to pick out everything that this movie has, the memories that people have about this movie, this would be like a 5-hour podcast. And to tell you the truth, I just don't have that kind of time. And I also want to talk about some of the themes that this movie may have been talking about. And really the only thing that I could gather from this movie is like the value of a human life. Like what is a person's life worth? And what does it mean to have to give your life to save another man's life, or another woman's life, or another person's life? Like, what does that mean to a person? What does that mean to a person's family? And this theme is kind of revisited throughout the film. So, and it's particularly, they're trying to like examine the lives, or the value of the life is when it's dealing with like your own allies, like the people that you are with. And it does not necessarily concern, the value of, or the movie is not concerned with the value of an enemy's life. But at the same time, especially like when you, like in the very first scene, you see a lot of lives are wasted. And it's like, one moment, you're talking to somebody, and the next moment he's just gone. It's like he's just gone, like instantly, almost as though he was never there in the first place. And this is incredibly impactful. How it's almost triggering how so many lives are lost. And it kind of shapes the perspective of what is the value of a person's life, and what can we do to give life meaning? So let's go over some of these parts. So obviously, the very first battle, the Omaha Beach battle, it's like one of the most impactful scenes in cinema history. It hits you hard. Like, you hear the bullets flying, and you hear the bullets impacting on flesh. And I had mentioned earlier, it sounds, especially when I saw it in the movie theater, it just sounds like bullets hitting meat. Like, I don't exactly know how they achieved the sound effects, but that's exactly what it sounds like they did. It sounds like that somebody had some slabs of meat, and they hung them up, and they had somebody shoot at these slabs of meat, and they recorded the sounds that made, because that's what it sounded like. And the sound was so realistic that it affects you in that way. Also, the whole assault on the beach really bothered me, because I'm thinking to myself, there had to have been a better way to do that, because this is actually based on real lives events. When it's basically the Allied forces, and they're attacking Normandy Beach, and the Allied military had divided the beaches, the overall beach, Normandy Beach, into several sections. So And the sections, one of the sections that it's often talked about, the section that the Americans had to assault was what they nicknamed Omaha Beach. It's, I'm thinking that it's like near the southern part of Normandy Beach. And the beach is heavily fortified. They've got all of these obstacles in the way. They've got, machine guns nests, that are all set up on the higher part of the beach. They got a bunch of booby traps for the boats. And the Allies chose to attack at low tide. And this is mainly to avoid all the booby traps that were set up for the ships. They had these giant, these giant whatchamacallits, that look like, jacks from, playing a game of jacks with the ball and the jack thing. So these are giant spike-like structures that are designed to rip open the hull of a ship when the hull runs into them. And that's what the Germans had meant to happen. They suspected that the Allies, if they were going to attack the beach, they would try to attack at high tide to minimize the distance that the soldier would have to go to get to the men that were defending the beach. So, that was one of the booby traps they laid out. But at low tide, you can see them. So the boats don't actually approach that close to the beach, and they can see all the booby traps. And basically they let, the boats with the men, I don't know, what do you call these? I guess they're some kind of transport boats, and they're just filled with men. And the only thing that these boats do is they take the men from the ships that they came on, like the huge naval ships, and they transport like maybe 2 or 3 dozen men in these smaller transport boats from the giant ships, and they go to the beach. And then at the beach, a section of the boat, I guess the front part of the boat opens up, and then the men basically spill onto the beach, and that's where they begin their assault onto the Germans that are defending the beach. But really, was kind of nonsensical, kind of messed me up, is that, obviously the beach is defended by machine gun nests. There's so many machine gun nests. Apparently, maybe the Allies thought that the beach was like lightly defended or whatever. I don't know what they were thinking, but it was like, I wish that there was something they could have done differently. Cause like seeing it in the movie, it was like, you just see men getting slaughtered. Like these boats pull up to the beach, the front end of the boat opens up, and they're just exposed. They're just exposed to machine gun fire. And it's like, as soon as, the front end opens up, the men start to come out, they just get slaughtered. Cause it's like no cover. There's no protection. They're in broad daylight. So it's not like, even under the cover of night, it's like they're just exposed. And it's like, to see this and to see it on film is like, it's incredibly impactful. It's like, and it just makes you angry. It's like, there had to have been a better way to do that. It's like, to do this assault. Like, you think, couldn't they have had like planes drop some bombs or something? Or couldn't they have landed some tanks instead of landing men? I don't know what they could have done differently, but it seemed like a waste of life to just have the men come up to the beach, open up the boats, and just get slaughtered as the men were coming out of the boats. And the only reason that enough men were able to survive is because there were more soldiers than there were bullets. Apparently that was how they were able to make it onto the beach. And then once they were let off the boat, they couldn't stay with it. There's like no place to hide. They couldn't, hide under cover. There was no cover on the beach. So you had to run up to the rocky bluffs where they were, less exposed to the machine gun fire. And then there are lots of things that you see during this beach assault. You see men torn apart. You see, their guts all exposed because of explosions, because they were not just shooting, but they were throwing, I guess, mortars at the approaching Allies. And, there's this one particular scene where you see a guy, and it's like during the battle, and he's kind of almost nonchalantly, walking around with one arm blown off, and is looking around on the ground, looking for something. And finally he sees what he was looking for and picks it up. And it is apparently the part of his arm that had gotten blown off. He's going to take it with him, believing that somebody can reattach it later. This man is obviously in total shock. And then there are a couple of scenes where you have Captain Miller, and he's talking to somebody, and he turns around for a second, and then he turns back to the person he's talking to, and that person's been shot. Or he's talking to somebody, and the person in front of him is like being shot as he's talking to the person that's right beside him. Or there's this particular scene where this medic is telling Captain Miller that he has to help get some of these wounded soldiers off of the beach to make room for the tank. You don't want the tanks to run over the wounded soldiers. So he grabs one of the soldiers and he starts running up the beach to where he's trying to get to the bluff. And then an explosion hits nearby him, and he's knocked off his feet, and he gets back up and he starts to get the soldier again, the wounded soldier that he was dragging. And then when he gets a good look at him, he realized that the bomb hit the soldier, either the bomb or the mortar or whatever it was. Explosion hit the soldier that he was dragging, and now he's really just dragging barely half of a soldier. So the soldier's dead, so you just got to let him go and keep charging towards the end of the beach to the point where they're basically undercover from the German fire. So it's incredibly impactful. It's really meant to show just how horrific that warfare can be. And they obviously do a terrific job of it, because whenever people talk about Saving Private Ryan, this is one of the things that they talk about, this Omaha beach assault. And it's in all of its horrific glory. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that's not my own. It's like I'm not the only one who thinks that it's one of the finest achievements in cinematic history, capturing that moment. So I want to say my next favorite part is my favorite element of the movie is Barry Pepper. He as the sniper. I didn't catch everybody's name. So it's like whenever I watch this movie, I don't catch anyone. The only name that I can catch as I'm watching it is Captain Miller, and that's barely so. And so I just kind of identified the characters in the movie by either their position or their overall attitude. But the sniper, played by Barry Pepper, was very impactful. So the sniper was Private Jackson. And one of the things that was impactful about the character was that he would basically kind of say a prayer, but as he was in his sniper position and then getting ready to neutralize his opponents, that to protect his men, sighting the enemy in a sniper rifle, and then saying a prayer and then pulling the trigger. That's just really impactful. It was like that's one of the things I really think about when I think about this movie. I think about those moments with the sniper, Private Jackson. So that character's always been really impressive. So one of my other favorite parts is or this is more like a more impactful one of the most impactful parts. This is when Captain Miller and his group of, like, I think it's 7 men at this point, 5 or 6 men. I don't know. I didn't count. I wasn't really paying attention. It's Captain Miller is in charge of what's really a squad size element. It's a very unusual configuration for the Army. Like usually when you have a squad, you put maybe a staff sergeant in charge, or a sergeant first class might be in charge of a group of 5 or 6 guys. It's not something you wouldn't normally put an officer in charge of a group of like 5 or 6 guys, but that's the situation that Captain Miller finds himself in. And so he has this small group of men, and what they do is that they're going about, and they're deep in enemy territory. They kind of hook up with one of the American units that are that happen to be in that area. And so they're asking around, asking soldiers, have you seen Private Ryan? Which is kind of messed up. It's like, there are thousands and thousands of people in this region, and they're just going around finding like one or two units, like military units, going, have you seen Private Ryan? Have you seen Private Ryan? It's kind of a messed up way to look for something, but that was the mission that they were given. And so they're there and they're asking these other soldiers, have you seen Private Ryan? And it's like, you got guys who's like, I don't, we don't know. We don't, we don't know that guy. We don't know who you're talking about or whatever. And so, this is a point where Captain Miller is starting to lose it, right? Cause the mission is nonsense, and he understands that this is a nonsensical mission. And so he starts to lose his composure a little bit. He just starts screaming, Ryan, Private Ryan. He's really, really upset about it. But what's coincidental about that is that, or what's fortuitous, is that somebody actually answers him, and somebody was like, actually, yeah, I know a guy named Private Ryan. And they were able to kind of narrow down the Private Ryan that he was looking for. So it was just him starting to lose it just a little bit, because throughout basically the whole movie, Captain Miller's in control. He's in command. He's in control. He's steadfast. He's dependable. But there was just this one moment where he starts to lose it just a little bit. And it's all due to the frustration of this mission and how, just annoyed with this particular thing that he's asked to do. One of the things that they want to do is that they're, while they're here in this spot, there are a bunch of like a huge bag of dog tags. So they figure, well, maybe if Private Ryan have been killed, they can look through these dog tags and they can find his name. And if they find his name among these dog tags of dead soldiers, they can be like, mission accomplished. And so they start going through this dog tag. And meanwhile, the medic is in another part. He's like, this is given that they're at this, like, I guess it's kind of like an encampment or temporary encampment with a bunch of soldiers. And this is where they brought some of the soldiers that have been wounded. So the medic immediately goes into action trying to help stabilize some of these other soldiers. And then while he's doing that, he sees the rest of his squad, Captain Miller and everybody else going through these dog tags. And at the same time, the members of the unit that Private Ryan belongs to, they're kind of walking through, and they see Captain Miller and the squad going through these dog tags of their dead comrades. And the medico's like, I can't believe you guys, he stops what he's doing. He rushes over and he grabs the dog tag and he hides the dog tags away. He puts all the dog tags back in the bag. And it's like, his unit is right there. They're looking at you going through their dead comrades. They're right there. What's wrong with you guys? So that was super impactful, because it's like, once again, it's the theme of the value of a man's life. You just don't, you're not smoking and joking over a bunch of dead soldiers. It's a bad look, right? So there has to be a certain amount of care and candor and sensitivity when you're dealing with, this issue. And Captain Miller decides that, that Private Ryan was not there. It's like, he's not going to be among these dog tags. Like, they never actually finished going through the dog tags. He just decided that at that moment that Private Ryan is not there, and that they're going to continue looking for it, because he realized that, the insensitivity of the situation, and trying to find, looking through dog tags while the people that were members of Private Ryan's unit are just kind of looking at him like, what's wrong with these guys? So that's another very impactful scene. And then attached to that scene is at one point the medic gets hit, and that's a really sad scene because he's a medic. he kind of knows that he's going to die. And, as the other men are trying to save his life. So he asks for morphine because he knows that he's dying at that moment. So he asks for morphine so that, he wouldn't be in pain as he goes. And that happens soon after that scene. So I just kind of lumped them together. That was incredibly impactful. Pretty much all of the scenes where you have the members of the team when they get hit and they lose their lives, those are all incredibly impactful scenes. Because whenever one of them dies, it's like really up close and personal. And it really hits you hard because you knew them as characters, and then this is a character that's going to be taken away because this is war, and war costs lives. The other thing that I really like is Captain Miller and how he views, I don't know, kind of like the things that he has to do, or in furthering the theme of a person's life. Like when a soldier gets killed under his command, he doesn't see it as like the soldier being killed by the enemy or the soldier stepping on the landmine and how that's basically enemy action. He takes it personal. He sees it as, he says, every soldier that I kill, right? So he says every soldier that I kill, I feel further away from home, because his ultimate goal is just to follow his orders and get home. It's like he feels that if he can follow his orders and basically get as many men home as he can, or if he can get through a mission without losing as few men as possible during that mission, then he feels like he gets closer to home. So he takes it personal when he loses a person under his command. He doesn't see it as an enemy action. He sees it as his personal responsibility. He says, every man that I kill. So if, they're on a mission and one of his soldiers gets shot and killed, he says, every man that I kill. And he takes it personal. And it's like, I've never seen anybody talk in those terms before, to take it that personally. He doesn't see it as an enemy action. He sees it as his personal responsibility to make sure that he save as many men as possible can go home when he goes home. When he says that he feels further away from home, I think what he's saying is that he sees it as a failure. Like when a person gets killed during the war, he sees it as a failure in his part, and that failure pushes him further and further away from his ultimate goal of surviving the war and getting home. So I thought that was incredibly impactful. So I'm going to do 2 more. I usually just do 5 favorite parts. I think I've done 4 so far, and one of them I'm kind of lumped together, but I'm going to do like 2 more. So the one of them is the chance finding of Private Ryan. And I like the way that had turned out. So the Captain Miller and his squad, they're on patrol, and then next thing you know, they come across some armored German soldiers. They're like in a tank or whatever, and they gotta hide, and then they ambush the tank, and then at the same time, there's some more Americans out in the field, and they're able to take down the Germans. And, everybody survived, they give themselves a high five. How you doing? And then it's like, oh yeah, this is, my name is Sergeant so-and-so, and this is Private Ryan. It's like, oh yeah, Private Ryan? You're Private Francis Ryan? And the guy says, yeah, you're from Fulton, Iowa, or wherever it is. And the guy says, yeah, that's me. I'm the guy. And you're Private James Francis Ryan of Patton, Iowa. And he says, yeah. And it's like, yeah, you're the guy I've been looking for. So yeah, I like that chance meeting. I thought that was pretty cool. That it wasn't so much as they they were looking for him and somebody found him for him. It was just a coincidence that they had found him out in the field, because that's how life works out sometimes. And I really like that. And then, after they find Ryan, it's, Ryan doesn't want to leave. It's interesting because this is the second Private Ryan that they found. The first Private Ryan was played by Nathan Fillion, and Nathan Fillion was kind of a mess. And, because Captain Miller had told him that his brothers had died before he verified that that was the Private Ryan that he was looking for. So every other time that he found a private whose name was Ryan, he made sure that, he gave the entire name, Private James Francis Ryan, and then are you the James Francis Ryan from Patton, Iowa? And it was like, and before he gives the bad news about his brothers being killed. And that was the thing about the movie, was that Private Ryan had 3 other brothers, and they all joined the military. They all joined the army, and his 3 brothers were killed, and he was the only brother left. So the Department of the Army decided that they didn't want to have him, they already had to give his mother like 3 death notices, and they didn't want to wipe out this entire family, I guess. Even though there are other soldiers in the field, other men being killed, they decided that in this singular issue, maybe they should save this one soldier. And it's like, it strikes everybody as nonsensical. It's like, it strikes Private Ryan himself as nonsensical, because his idea is like, these men that I've been serving with had sacrificed as much as I did. They fought just as hard. Why don't they get to go home? And that kind of hits you pretty hard. It's like, why don't they get to go home? So basically, they come up with a compromise, because Private Ryan's, his unit has basically been devastated, torn apart, and it's really only a few men that he's with, and they don't even have a commander. So, or they don't have an officer. So Captain Miller kind of takes over his unit, and that particular unit, they were in charge of guarding this bridge. So I think the compromise is basically, we're gonna help you guard this bridge or keep the Germans from crossing it. And then once we get reinforced, we're gonna take you back stateside. That was the plan. So yeah, that was I like that meeting of Private Ryan. And the last thing I have is this is during that particular battle when the Germans were going to try to cross this bridge, and there was a huge battle. And so you had Corporal Upham. Now, Corporal Upham is a translator. He's not really someone who's like really in battle. Like every soldier is trained to shoot and whatnot, but not every soldier sees battle. There are some soldiers that are purely administrative. They serve with their typewriters, and they almost never see combat. And Corporal Upham was one of those soldiers. He was coming along as a translator who could speak French and German. But now he's thrust in a situation where he's going to have to go into combat. And it's like, there are lots of times where he's absolutely paralyzed, and it's like he won't move. He's basically paralyzed by fear. He's basically a coward. So, but he has to be Johnny on the spot with the ammo. He has to run ammo back and forth. So he has to go from one location and bring ammo to the different positions that are along where his unit has set up, so they will have ammo to fight. But it gets to the point where he is so scared to move that he's not bringing the ammo, and then the guys that relied on him to bring the ammo, they run out, and then they have to defend themselves against this German soldiers. Find out where where they're at, where they're shooting, their firing position. And, he gets into a scuffle. And what happens is that the corporal, he's in the building. He's in the building where the scuffle is happening. He can hear his fellow soldier fighting for his life against this German soldier that's, trying to, they're scuffling. It's hand-to-hand combat. Neither one of them has a gun and they're scuffling. And he could easily, and he has his weapon. He could easily go up there and shoot the German soldier, but he is so scared. He's so paralyzed by fear that he doesn't do anything. And so the German soldier, somebody whips out a knife. The German soldier gets the upper hand. He's much stronger than, I think it's Private Hellish that's in this fight. He's much stronger than Private Hellish, and basically slowly stabs him through the chest. And then when he's done, he starts walking out of the bed. He's walking downstairs. He's walking down the stairwell, and there's Corporal Upham with this huge thing of ammo around his neck, and he just kind of like stands and let the German soldier go by, and the soldier just goes about his business. So that was a powerful moment, because you see how war affects people and how it basically it turned Corporal Upton into somebody that was truly ineffectual. And you see how grisly the fighting can be, the hand-to-hand combat, how impactful it could be just sitting there watching it. It's like, it gives you a visceral reaction, or it gave me a visceral reaction anyway. So those are some of my favorite parts. I'm pretty sure those are some of your favorite parts. If you have any parts that you wanted to discuss or you wanted to talk about, you can go ahead, and why don't you send an email or leave a comment below if you're watching, or if you're listening to this on YouTube. Let me know what some of your favorite parts of Saving Private Ryan is. All right, it's time for the next chapter, or the next segment, or the next part of the podcast, and that is the top 10 trivia. This time, I do have 10 pieces of trivia, and that I was able to gather from IMDb. So let's talk about the trivia. Starting with this. All the principal actors, except for Matt Damon, underwent a week-long course at an Army-style boot camp instructed by technical advisor Dale Dye. Tom Hanks, who had previously been trained by Dye for the Vietnam War scenes in Forrest Gump from 1994, was the only one of them who knew it would be a hard and uncompromising experience. The other guys, I think, were expecting something like camping in the woods and maybe learning things while sitting around the campfire. Damon was, and this is a quote from Tom Hanks, Damon was spared so that the other actors would resent him and would convey that feeling in their performances. And I think it does. I think that definitely works. The Omaha beach scene cost $11 million to shoot and involved up to 1,000 extras, some of whom were members of the Irish Army Reserve. Of those extras, 20 or 30 of them were amputees issued with prosthetic limbs to play soldiers who had their limbs blown off. That was incredibly creative and also a little bit unnerving. The two quote-unquote German soldiers who were shot trying to surrender were speaking Czech. They were saying, "Please don't shoot me. I am not German. I am Czech. I didn't kill anyone. I am Czech." They were members of what the Germans called the Ost or East Battalions, men mostly Czech and Polish, taken prisoner in Eastern European countries, invaded by Germany, and forced into the German army. The closed captioning for the film on VHS and DVD/Blu-ray bears this out, with the language being labeled as Czech. Steven Spielberg cast Matt Damon as Private Ryan because he wanted an unknown actor with an all-American look. He did not know Damon would be nominated for an Oscar for the hit Good Will Hunting from 1997 and became an overnight star before the film was released. Yeah, so Steven Spielberg was looking for an unknown actor and accidentally cast a star. Many veterans of D-Day congratulated director Steven Spielberg on the film's authenticity, as did James Doohan, who is best known for playing Scotty in Star Trek, the show that started in 1966 and continued for decades. Doohan lost the middle finger of his right hand and was wounded in the leg during the war. Also, he participated in the invasion of Normandy on June 6, 1944, at Juno Beach, where the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division led the attack. He commended Spielberg for not leaving out any of the gory details. That is James Doohan, a for real war hero. The special effects team rigged the actors' rifles with special sensors that sent a signal to exploding squibs located on the targets. Shortly after an actor pulls the trigger, the targeted squib detonates, creating a realistic impact for both shooter and target. That is so interesting. I wonder if they still do that, and if they don't do that, why not? Some critics complained that the scene where the Rangers are throwing mortar wounds by hand at the German soldiers was unrealistic. In fact, Medal of Honor recipient Charles Kelly actually did this during the Battle of Italy in 1943. Steven Spielberg claimed that he considered the film a passion project as a gift to his aging father, a World War II veteran. He further claimed that he made the picture against his commercial instincts, believing that there would not be a wide audience for a World War II movie with graphic violence, and was pleasantly surprised when it became a blockbuster hit. In India, the film was blocked by the Censor Board of India for too much violence. The board demanded cuts that Steven Spielberg declined to make, and instead he decided not to release the movie in India at all. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, the then Home Minister of India saw the movie himself and, impressed, ordered it to be released uncut, because that was the only way you was going to get to see it. And finally, Ted Danson. This film resurrected Danson's career, as Cheers from 1982 had been off the air for 5 years, but he had been in a number of commercial and critical flops since then. His short appearance proved that he could do drama every bit as well as comedy, and he's worked steadily ever since. And I know that he's in the show now, but the last show that I've seen him in is when I recently watched The Good Place, and he is absolutely fantastic in that show. So that's it for the trivia, and now we're going to see what the critics thought. The critics have it at a 94%, and the audience has it at a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes. IMDb Reviews has it at an 8.6 out of 10. So yes, this is a very highly regarded film. Up first, we have Wesley Lovell from Cinema Site, and he wrote, "Not for the squeamish, Saving Private Ryan, a film that does not shy away from realistic violence and paints the most vivid portrait of war on film that I've seen." And to that, I have to say, me too. Serena Donadoni from Metro Times, Detroit, Michigan, wrote, "Steven Spielberg has made a film about bravery that doesn't shy away from the horrors encountered by soldiers, even in a quote-unquote good war. But he wasn't quite brave enough to present the story without a comforting coat of saccharine." And I don't know what she's talking about, since pretty much everybody but Private Ryan himself died. Here's Private Ryan and like one other soldier. I think it was Private Reuben. Private Reuben actually wanted to leave the group. He was like going to leave the squad because he was so upset about the ridiculousness of them going through the countryside, finding one soldier. They found a machine gun nest, and Captain Miller ordered them to destroy the machine gun nest so it's not sitting there for another soldier. Even though they were successful in their mission, they lost a soldier during that attack. He thought it was foolish because they could have just walked around the machine gun nest and nobody would have died. And he had threatened to leave. So it's almost an irony that he was pretty much the only soldier from that squad that was able to survive. So I don't see that as saccharine. It's kind of a strange comment. Up next is Stephen Hunter from the Washington Post. He wrote, "Searing, heartbreaking, so intense it turns your body into a single tube of clenched muscle. This is simply the greatest war movie ever made and one of the great American movies." I'm going to have to agree with that. It's my tacit agreement. And finally, we have Hellish Italy from the Associated Press. They wrote, "War may be a faceless affair, but war movies shouldn't be." But I don't know where they're getting this from because there's nothing about this movie that seems faceless. It could be even like some of the enemy were featured, but they were featured as enemies. Like we didn't get to know the enemies. They were all Nazis and they were all being killed. That was at least the function was to kill them. Like they were merely, it seemed like, I guess in a way they, since the movie wasn't about them, they were basically presented as obstacles. They were basically presented as NPCs, and maybe that is what they're referring to. There were only a few of the enemies that actually kind of meant anything to the story. One of them was, I think it was one of the soldiers that they found in the sniper, not the sniper nest, the machine gun nest. They were able to take the machine gun nest, and while they shot all the other soldiers, all the other German soldiers, one of them was alive. And this particular German soldier was talking about how much he loved America and how he was saying a bunch of American slogans and idioms to try to, ingratiate himself among Captain Miller and Captain Miller's squad. And in one case, he was trying not to die. In another case, he probably did like America. So we get to know that soldier, and we get to know the other soldier that killed, that I mentioned earlier at the final battle, that he killed the private in the knife fight. And that was because that was so up close and personal, but we never get to know their names or their motivations or anything like that. So it's purely from the American perspective. So that's it for what the critics thought. And at last, Saving Private Ryan is, as of this recording, available on Paramount Plus. That's it for today. And now I want to delve back and see a movie that I've been wanting to rewatch for a long time. And I kept bumping up against this movie, so I wanted to give it a look, but it looks like Strange Days, the movie that I wanted to watch, isn't available anywhere. Like, I don't have a physical copy, and I'm going to have to buy a physical copy because it doesn't seem to be streaming anywhere. So instead, I want to go and check out the world's most famous bomb. And that bomb was Kevin Costner's Waterworld. You can follow us on Blue Sky, Threads, TikTok, Instagram, and sometimes Twitter. Please contact us with any questions, comments, or suggestions at fanmail@backlickcinema.com. Please rate and review on your favorite podcast app. And if you're listening on YouTube, please like or subscribe or leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. One last time, if you like this show, then please help us grow by spreading the word about Backlick Cinema, the podcast. Believe me, it matters. I've been Zoe Richardson. Be safe, share a movie from yesteryear with your family, hug your loved ones, and if you're going to be anything, be outstanding.